these choices. I'm sure you understand the process now. You have to have a sort of an intent where the company wants to go, the objectives and the mission statement, and further based on an analysis of the environment and analysis of the firm, and on that basis you make a choice. Now, when if these choices are implemented well, it leads to a competitive advantage. The nice thing about this process is you can apply this to every decision that you make, whether at a personal level or at a professional level. We had an example of somebody asking about a husband's job. You can look at it in a broader way, and it should become second nature to you as you go forward. Always look at the environment, always look at what the firm can do, and then on that basis you make this choice. So in terms of the external analysis, in this case we are looking at opportunities and threats. And one of the things that I was trying to put forward in the first class is that once you learn about the Porter's 5 forces model, and once you learn about the resources and capabilities approach, you don't really need to have a SWOT analysis, because this is a SWOT analysis. You don't need to list opportunities and threats separately, because that is what you're going to cover in this particular model. Okay? There is no need to separately look at that. And this is what should come out from the 5 forces analysis. The key idea here is that the industry does play a very important role on how profitable a firm is going to be, and the 5 forces are the ones which make a difference. Important things to keep in mind. Here we are talking about the future attractiveness. We're not just looking backward. We want to really see what the industry is going to look like in say 5 years down the line. And not how it's going to look like, but how we can change the business and make it look the way we want. That can be both in terms of sustaining the performance, but also in terms of improving the firm's performance. We looked at in the context of the palm oil industry, commodity, not a very attractive business, and what the firms there have been doing it is they're moving downstream to oleochemicals and slightly more differentiated products which can make their industry attractive. We saw the same in the case of the airline industry, not very attractive, and so these firms form alliances to reduce rivalry. They think of things like frequent flyer miles, which can reduce the buyer power and so on. So always think in terms of how you can use this model to come up with something that will improve the industry environment. So it's just not a backward-looking model. The second part here, we're talking about strengths and weaknesses. Again, in order to talk of strengths and weaknesses, it is much better to think in terms of resources and capabilities. Because once you think in those terms, then you think of these 4 conditions and how those resources can lead to a competitive advantage. And here we are saying that the resources have to be valuable, they have to be rare. This idea is, I think, well established, that it should be difficult to imitate, and finally you have to exploit them, otherwise you can't achieve the competitive advantage. The interesting part here is this part, that it should be difficult to imitate or difficult to substitute. Various things which make resources difficult to imitate. We talked about a first mover advantage. We talked about things like patents, trademarks, and so on. And what the tower building exercise showed us is that first mover advantage rarely exists. It's very easy for someone else to come later on and copy what you do. Similarly, a lot of the time, it is difficult to patent a certain idea. It's always easy for someone to come and then copy that. So those two are not that important. The ones which turn out to be important are the soft issues like culture. So for example, Walmart has a low-cost culture. Sheng Siong, the local company, also has a low-cost culture. That part is more difficult to imitate. And the fourth one, which is difficult to imitate, is when you have a lot of fit between the activities that the firm is performing. And that fit makes it quite difficult, because if you imitate just one activity, then you don't succeed. You have to imitate a whole set of activities, and that is what we saw in the case of Edward Jones. The reason why this company is successful, because this strategy has not been imitated by other companies, and it's been difficult to imitate because there are a lot of things which sort of fit well together. If you do one but not the others, you don't get a benefit. Just one more point about internal analysis. So when you talk about resources, you can list basically all the resources that the firm has in terms of financial, human, reputational resources, and so on. And the other way is to do a value chain analysis in terms of the primary activities and the support activities and so on. And for each of those activities, you can sort of see whether that is really leading to a competitive advantage. So based on these analysis, you make your choices first at the business level. Idea here is quite clear: cost advantage and differentiation. In terms of cost advantage, very important to differentiate first between having a cost advantage and having low prices. Sometimes I see people getting confused between the two. Low prices and low cost don't always go together. You can have high prices and low cost, which is exactly the kind of situation that you want to be in. Important to think in terms of the drivers, and something which I always emphasize is very important to really go down to the details. Like now, economies of scale, everyone knows is a way to achieve cost advantage. But important to know where these economies of scale are. Like now, for which activity do you have economies of scale? And only when you go down to the details is when you really understand what the business is all about. We saw in the case of Dell that a company has been able to achieve a cost advantage by sort of reconfiguring the value chain, taking out a few activities that the other companies are doing, saving that and passing that advantage to customers in terms of lower prices. When it comes to differentiation, important thing to keep in mind is it's all about a perception that a product is different. If the product is actually different or if it's not different, it doesn't really matter. What matters is consumers have to think that the product is different. Various ways in which you can differentiate, and the Coke versus Pepsi, the blind taste test that we did. I did it myself back home with a third cola drink, F&N. They launched a new cola drink at home, and I tried it and I couldn't make out which one is which. And that is the case for most consumers. And that hasn't stopped these two companies from making billions of dollars in profits. And again, drives from the point that it is a perception, not differences in product features. So usually we just limit ourselves to thinking about product features, but that is the one that is easiest to copy. Things about reputation, the linkages that you have within the firm, and the linkages that you have with other firms, they are the ones that really give you a differentiation advantage. So we did talk about this in a bit of detail because technology plays a big role in quite a few industries. Even if you think your industry is not going to be affected by technology, suddenly it might be. Your newspapers, very traditional, very old industry, but suddenly it's all topsy-turvy because technology is making a big difference. And two key things to keep in mind. One, the company which comes up with the innovation doesn't always capture the profits. Very important to look at these conditions, patents, the complementary resources you have in terms of marketing, distribution, financial resources, and so on. Whether the technology itself, is it easy to copy or is it complex? And finally, whether you have a first mover advantage. And what we saw in the case of the fuel cell cars is a lot of the time it will come down to whether you can get this going, whether you can lower the manufacturing cost, whether you can finance and develop the network for distribution of fuel, and so on. So the product by itself is got a small role to play compared to these resources. The other part is how do you get from invention to innovation, something which came up in the presentation today. You need to go and you need to integrate new knowledge with multiple business functions, because if you want to take it to the market, not just create the product. You need to have supportive policies. This point also came up. May not be applicable to all companies. Different companies have to see which are the different ways in which you can create a culture of innovation. In the case of 3M, we saw that acceptance of well-intentioned failure, something with our MBA training, sometimes we find it difficult to accept. But if you overanalyze something, if you look at all the numbers, most of the time you'd say not worth doing it. If you want to take an entrepreneurial approach, sometimes you have to go beyond these numbers and look at some of the other factors. So the second part of the decision making is with respect to corporate strategy. and it can be in terms of product classification, vertical scope, as well as in terms of geographic classification. And the first one is product classification. The most important reason is economies of scope, and we saw that in the case of P&G. A company can share the activities across a diverse range of products in terms of manufacturing, distribution, R&D. It can also share the competencies across a different range of products. And it is the sharing of competencies which really creates an advantage. And in the case of P&G, you see that they can share the competencies for brand management, marketing, distribution, and so on. And that is what really creates an advantage in terms of classification. Some of the other factors are not that important. One thing we unfortunately see is that managers do it for their own personal benefit, and it doesn't really benefit the firm or its shareholders when a firm classifies. So having economies of scope is one thing, but how do you actually capture? So if we saw the case of Alibaba, that there are potential economies of scope, but the firm still has chosen not to capture because when you create these linkages across the different businesses, then that sort of makes the firm quite rigid. And sometimes P&G is accused of that, like the Proctoids, the P&G people are like very slow in moving, whereas Alibaba really wanted these companies to really react and change very fast along with the market environment. So how do you actually capture this economies of scope remains a big issue still. In terms of vertical integration, you'll see lots of reasons being offered for why a firm should integrate forward or backward or not do it. But always be very skeptical. Same thing for classification as well. Always play the devil's advocate and see whether something is like really valid. Two benefits, not a lot. We're just talking about 2 or 3 potential benefits. The idea that coordination within the firm is sometimes better than the coordination that exists across a market interface. And the second idea is that there are these transaction costs because there is a risk of opportunism.